Hi, everyone. Thank you for good morning and good afternoon. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar. I'm here with Dr. Hugh from Solcast. Super excited to bring today's session for you. And we're going to talk about the forecasting of the solar energy production by using a high resolution of the TMY data, and then also how it impacts our battery dispatch strategies. We're gonna give it another 1 minute for the audience to join, and I can see already a lot of you guys are online. Um, If you have anything want to say, comments, questions, you will be able to access it in this webinar's interface. There should be a chat box for you, and there's also a question tab for you to raise any questions. All right, I think we can give it another 30 seconds or something. I don't think we've ever really talked, Dr. Hugh. When we rehearsed, it was always about the contents themselves. What's the time there for where you're based?
Yeah, so I'm in Sydney. It's 4:30 in the afternoon now. So
Nice.
good time of year to be speaking to Europe. I think if we were a month ago, we'd be another couple of hours apart. A lot different.
Yeah, exactly. I remember the winter times here to wake up super early for the calls in Oceania region was really
Hmm.
painful for me. Now it's much better. It's 8:30 here. Honestly, I'm surprised by how many audience we have today, considering yesterday we had a total outage in Europe here. And I was assuming that people wouldn't come to work super early. Like my company right now, the office is pretty empty, which I could imagine after 12 hours of no electricity and no internet. But now I'm happy to be back in civilization. And the first thing I'm doing is giving this webinar. Super thrilling.
I'm glad it came back online in time.
Exactly, yes. I was really worried that this wouldn't happen, honestly. Everything was off until yesterday at 3 a.m. I think that's when electricity was back to my building. Super crazy. All right, we have so many audience already, and we've waited a bit longer than usual to talk about the anecdotes happened yesterday. Let's start this off. So again, thank you for joining for today's webinar. We're going to talk about the solar forecasting with higher resolution of the data resource from Solcast, and then how that impacts our batteries dispatch strategies, which was a new feature on RatedPower since the end of 2024. So let's introduce a little bit of ourselves. First, I'm Ming, and I'm the technical advisor at RatedPower, and I've been working here for 3 years and closely with Oceania region, APAC, China and Japan, etc. And now it's your turn, Dr. Hugh.
Yeah, thanks, Ming. As it says, I'm the head of data science at Solcast. Been there since 2020. Originally, got a background in mechanical engineering, but been working in the solar space kind of since then. In charge of the team that creates all of Solcast data and algorithms.
Super. Super exciting. So let me start with today's agenda. Thank you, first of all, Doctor, for joining with us. And we did some preparation beforehand. Thank you for spending time with us. It's really an honor. So first, we're gonna give you the floor and let you introduce Soulcast and its data of hourly and sub-hourly and how you get your data from. And then I'm going to go through RatedPower case study and show the users how they could integrate Solcast data in RatedPower and some small tips, and also show them the results of the real impacts on our energy production and battery. And then finally, we're going to have a quick Q&A depending on the time that we're having today. So I'm going to give it to you from now. First, let's go to Solcast.
Yeah, thanks. So start with an introduction of who Solcast is for those of you not already familiar. So we were founded back in 2016, based out of Sydney, where I still am, but have grown pretty rapidly to become a global team now, with people spread across the world in Asia, North America, and Europe, and also acquired by DNV back in 2020 to become part of a much larger organization that has let us expand our capabilities beyond just the solar data space. We serve data all over the world. You can see from this map that where that usage kind of comes from. That supports over 350 gigawatts worth of assets, which means and to do that, we need to process a huge amount of data, about 2 terabytes a day, to create our irradiance and weather estimates, and we serve that primarily through API access with over 26 million calls a day as well. That lets us support a huge number of use cases, providing global data and data that spans across a different range of time too, from historical and TMY data back to 2007 out to 14-day forecasts. So to create that, we use a range of different data sources that includes archival and live satellite imagery, reanalysis, and forecast data sets to provide the best available estimates of cloud and solar, irradiance and PV power, regardless of where you are in the world or the time period that you care about. So to help kind of explain how we create this data, I wanted to use a particular framing device, which is this hierarchy of solar impact. So I don't know if any of you are familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs, but we've kind of created an analogous version for Solcast, which is the hierarchy of solar impact. The idea behind both those models is that the different levels or different components are ranked in terms of their relative importance, with more foundational aspects lower down on the pyramid. I'll delve into some of the particular aspects in more detail as some examples later, but to quickly summarize them now, starting at the bottom, we have solar position, so where the sun is in the sky, and notably if you can see it or not. It's not necessarily a difficult thing to calculate, but is, as we'll see, kind of the primary impact or largest driver of how much irradiance is available at your location. Next is atmospheric attenuation, also referred to as clear sky irradiance, i.e. the amount of irradiance that you get under cloud-free scenarios. So this includes the effects of aerosols, as well as the other atmospheric conditions, and we'll see in a specific example how that can be a big driver of irradiance variability. Then you have cloud. This is kind of the real meat of what happens in creating solar data. It's the primary source of variability, and where Solcast really earns its keep in creating cloud estimates. Soiling next includes the effects of dust and snow and other particulate that accumulates on panels and reduces the amount of incident radiation and generation. It's one of the factors that can really vary the most with location and with time, although the average impact may be less than those other components further down the pyramid. Shading, that's the occlusion of sun by other objects, whether they're nearby like a tree or on the horizon like a mountain, and can be another factor that varies a lot by location. And lastly, we have astronomical phenomena. This is things like solar flares and eclipses that have minor average effects, but can have large specific impacts, particularly eclipses. So it's worth noting this is a pretty simplified model and is more of a framing device, but does vary with their relative performance. So to help visualize what that looks like, and what those losses are kind of on average, I've got this example time series here. You can see a huge portion, nearly 80%, is lost to solar position. Comes with the nighttime, but is also the effect of solar zenith. Then you lose another 30% on average to atmospheric attenuation, mostly just the scattering of light as it passes through the atmosphere. And then cloud losses, which are about a 25% again. But as you can see in this time series, that's what creates that variability we're used to seeing in solar irradiance data. The last few components don't even show, mostly because on average they are of the order of less than 1%, so don't visualize very well, but can have highly specific impacts, as I talked about before. So to look at something in more detail, we'll start with an example of atmospheric attenuation. So that scattering of light, it does vary with atmospheric conditions, things like pressure or the amount of water vapor, plus just the amount of atmosphere in the way, so varies a lot with elevation. But the primary cause of temporal variability at different sites is aerosols. That can be sand, or in the case of something like this, the 2020 wildfires in California, it's smoke. In regions where there's less cloud, drier areas, smoke can have as large as an impact as clouds on the amount of available irradiance. And that's what we saw during this few months of fires in California in 2020, where you would, a site on the eastern side of California would lose more to that smoke than it did to cloud over that same time. So understanding that impact and knowing that you could drop all the way down is pretty key. So it's pretty high up on that pyramid, but soiling, and particularly events like snowstorms, can cause really large drops in PV generation. So accounting for those soiling losses is important for understanding what your generation minimums are, and knowing that large-scale storms like we see over Germany here can cause huge drops in the available solar generation across a grid, resulting in rapid changes in electricity pricing. And so there is a correlated effect on the impact you might see from soiling losses at individual locations or across a fleet of locations, and what is happening with the pricing market. So I will admit, part of the reason for showing off terrain shading here is that there's this nice animation, but the other reason is to help understand the importance of knowing what times of day and how much by the irradiance and therefore generation is impacted by things like nearby mountains. Particularly something like knowing that the sun drops behind an object in the afternoon during that peak demand period is key for understanding what potential, particularly financial generation or outcomes are going to be. And that's why Solcast uses high resolution elevation data to work out what the terrain profile is and how much radiance is lost by the occlusion of the sun and the drop in visible sky. So I'd be very remiss not to talk about cloud, given I said it is kind of the bread and butter of what Solcast do. Cloud has this tricky combination where it has very large impact on the amount of irradiance available, but is also difficult to model. So it sits in like that right-hand top corner of being hard and important. For Solcast, we primarily generate our estimates of cloud using geostationary satellites, um, 5 of them all around the world to give us some global coverage. And that lets us create estimates that are high resolution in both time and space. And then we can feed those into our irradiance and power models to say how much irradiance and then how much PV power is going to be available at a given location. So you can see the effect or the comparison of that resolution when you compare it against more generic weather sources like NWP, as shown here. So on the left, the 1 to 2 kilometer resolution, spatial resolution, tracking clouds at 5-minute increments, versus something like that you get out of more generic weather data where it's hourly and more of the order of 25 kilometers. Makes a big difference on understanding what the impact of those clouds are on your site. And the last thing I think I want to talk about for Solcast is how we provide access to this data. It's no good that we just create great data, but it's also important that you can get access to it easily. And that's why a ready access is a core part of what Solcast does, and what allows us to partner with companies like RatedPower to help you get access to good quality meteor data when you simulate other parts of the PV lifecycle. So playing now is an example from our Python SDK, showing how you could use the API to fetch TMY data in just a few seconds. Hopefully that's a nice little summary of what Solcast does, provides.
Super. Thank you, Dr. Hugh. And now I'm going to show our audience how we could actually transfer that data to RatedPower and automatically read into our simulations. First, I have prepared this case. It's based in Spain, and it has a DC capacity of around 19 megawatt DC. And DC's ratio at the first scenario I'm running was 1.2. And since we're talking about the battery, arbitrage strategy is the to-go option for RatedPower. And I have used although the site is in Spain, I have used the wholesale market price from AMO from Australia because Spain lacks the volatility of the price in its local market. So I'm a bit cheating here. Let me go to RatedPower first of all to show you how you could quickly introduce Solcast data into our platform. All right, so here is the projects that I have prepared and used for today's case study. If we go into any of the design, if we clone into the design interface in the Meteor data parts, you will see that since I have already introduced Solcast API key into our software, the hourly data is already waiting there for us. So whenever you're creating a new site on RatedPower, it's going to automatically locate the coordinates of this site and find the data from the API that we're integrating with Solcast. And you can see the details here as well. And in today's case, knowing that Solcast provides a huge variety of different data, I'm also using a 15 minutes TMY data from Solcast. For this one, I have downloaded from their site. So the data itself would look like this. So you would have to carefully choose what are the key or the KPIs that you're downloading from their site. So for rated power, what we're reading into is GHI, DNI, the temperature, average temperature, relative humidity, wind speed, and precipitable water. These are the keys that we're reading into. So after you download from them, by the way, a small tip here, we should download the P50 scenario, and also remember the uh, time zone. It should be you're in your time zone instead of UTM 0. And then after downloading that, I would actually have to incorporate with our generic template. That would be in our tutorial in here, how to, and uploading the CSV format here. So eventually, after reading into it, you will have the details here as well. So this apparently is aggregated into monthly for the charts already. But when we're simulating the model in our energy engine, it's going to be based on this resolution, so 15 minutes of data. In today's session, I will also show you the results that's based on the comparison between the hourly and the 15 minutes resolution of data. And I also want to show you where you could find all those results. So on rated power, we're providing you an energy yield result based on the PV production, and it will be based on the resolution that your input is. For example, if your input is hourly, the results will be hourly. And if it's 15 minutes, the results will be 15 minutes as well. And then the other one we're analyzing for today is the battery energy yield results. This will show you, for example, for today's case, I'm using a DC coupled battery, how this battery is going to behave, which are the hours it's charging and discharging. And that is all based on your PV production and the energy price that we're forecasting. So as a feed into the software, you would have to upload your revenue scheme here. So assuming that we're doing the arbitrage for this entire battery solution, you can upload your energy price in different resolution as well. We know in different countries, it's operating on different levels of the time frame. For rated power, we're providing hourly time frame so far up to 50 years. So what I did was to download the energy price from AMO and aggregated them into a monthly data. So you can see, for example, the average spread for the historical data every day is 111 US dollars, which is pretty huge. And then for the battery itself, the inputs are quite simple. We have done tons of webinar explaining our battery solution. So basically the user could introduce the equipment they want to use. For instance, I'm using a DC coupled battery here. So I'm using some DC-DC converter, the battery containers, and then I could also require certain hours of supply cycle duration throughout the day, and also the layouts, how it's related to the power station we're having on site. And then finally, to enable our arbitrage strategy, we would have to introduce the dispatch parameters, for example, the efficiency of our battery charging and discharging, and if we're allowing it to charge from the grid or combined with PV and grid both, and also some degradation factors. Eventually, on our interface, you will find what's interesting is not only the capacity of your battery, the lifespan, and the total energy discharged to the grid from your lifespan, but also the economic value of your battery solution. For our entire site, including the PV and battery, our LCOE is such, and our IRR is 17.21% in this scenario. And these two values are great metrics for you to visualize how much your battery is actually benefiting your total projects. Is it really giving you enough revenue to develop? And this is also one of the metrics that we're looking at in the case study. So let me go back to the slides and show you what I have found for all of the cases that I have run. All right, so first scenario, I have done an AC coupled battery, and the size of the battery would be 22 megawatts, and I'm charging it for about 2 hours every day. And I have used 1 hour and 15 minutes Meteor for data. And as a result, you will observe that for our 1 hour resolution, we're observing a higher specific yield and a higher energy production for the first year. Of course, the you will see in the later slides, I forgot to take a screenshot here. I think the PR performance ratio for the hourly Meteor data scenario will be also higher. And all in all results in a higher IRR for our hourly scenario. And the next I have studied on a DC coupled battery with a smaller size of 6.93, and I'm charging it for about an hour per day. And we also observed the same. The specific yield for the hourly resolution is higher, and the power performance ratio is 0.1% higher. And the IRR, again, for the hourly resolution scenario is winning. Then finally, I have also done a DC coupled battery for even smaller capacity, 2.31 megawatts. Remember, our site is about 90 megawatt DC big. And I'm charging it for longer hours throughout the day. And I know this is pretty popular in many countries that we're giving a very high DC ratio. So we're trying to recover all the unused DC power to the battery and arbitrage or making benefit of the battery more than the PV. And then as a result, we also observed lower a PR and specific yield in the 15-minute scenario, and also a lower IRR for that side. So all in all, in conclusion, for all of the scenarios that we have studied for today's case, the hourly resolution is giving us a better energy production result and also a higher IRR for the battery solution. And if we have a look at our battery curve that the software is generating automatically for the for our customers to visualize how to strategize their batteries charging and discharging to the grid based on the economic technological study, we will see that there's also a slight difference between the hourly and 15 minutes resolution, two different scenarios. So for this case, for example, the disease ratio as high of 2.799. The right side, we have the table of the difference of the battery discharging strategy. So we can observe that throughout the day, for every single month, there is a different pattern of discharging to the grid from our battery side. So if we impose the different the 15 minutes curve to the hourly curve, you will notice the difference between two curves. It's very, very subtle, but at the lower generation side or lower discharging hours, we can observe a higher difference in comparison with the other time. So now we want to dive a little bit more into the results. Why are we reading a higher energy production on the hourly resolution data and how that impacts our overall battery solution? So again, we're using the scenario where we're having the disease ratio of 2.799, and we have two scenarios where we're using 1 hour Meteor file and 15 Meteor file. So overall, we can observe, first of all, the inverter power limits loss is higher when we're using 15 minutes resolution of meteor source. So the average is around 1%. And this is due to the model will be able to explicitly model the inverter losses for every 15 minutes instead of masking out for the entire hour. In this hour, the climate or the cloud or even the sun position itself, as Dr. Hugh has mentioned earlier, which accounts for almost 80% of our accuracy of the meteor forecast. So in this hour, things are changing a lot. If we're using the hourly resolution of data, we're basically smoothing things out. And if we're using a higher resolution, we're accepting more spikes and more irregularity within an hour, which poses a higher inverter power limit loss. And Dr. Hugh, I have a question here for you. I do know that for a lot of companies, to account for this extra power limits loss for inverter, they would oppose another maybe up to 2.6%, as far as I know, to their energy yield assumption, right? Is that something that's you're aware of as well?
Yeah, I know from my colleagues within the energy assessment part of DNV that um, a lot of modeling is still happening at hourly. The availability of finer resolution data is relatively new. But so to account for those losses or sub-hourly losses, yeah, you would throw on a bulk correction at the end, something that PVSys or your power modeling software might provide an estimate for you of, yeah, the order of a couple of percent.
Understood. So when people are actually trying to throw in a correction factor of several percentage, if we're using the higher resolution of data, we could actually more accurately capture that loss instead of using a higher assumption there, I think. All right, so um, next would be the PR. Of course, because of the higher power limits loss of the inverter, we're observing a lower performance ratio in the same projects. And then finally, is the energy production. Also, because of these higher losses, we're observing a slight lower energy production compared with the hourly resolution. Now, I want to help our audience to identify those losses in the results that RatedPower is delivering. So first of all, where do we read the inverter power limits losses? So if you download the energy yield assessment Excel file that I have mentioned earlier in our documentation list, you will find in the loss diagram here, I have already aggregated, I have already transferred our 15 meteor data to this table as well. And on the right side column would be the differences between the two data. We're observing 0.3 lower percent of the power limits loss for the hourly resolution, which is in line with what we were saying all the way before. And if we have another look at the irradiation itself, actually, we could observe a slight higher transposition on the POA when we're using a higher hourly meteor resource there as well, which I will dissect a little bit more in our final conclusion part. So let's focus more on the inverter losses. If we go to another tab, the first year hourly data, we could actually calculate the DC arrays outputs per hour or per 15 minutes and the inverter's outputs there. And what if we aggregate the data from 15 minutes solution resolution to hourly and comparables? Here is our difference heat map. So we can obviously see in the uh, a winter times, we're observing a higher difference between both DC array outputs and the inverter's outputs. And these two heat maps are actually consistent, coherent with each other when we are looking at the differences. And then another thing is related with our battery. For the last tab of our energy yield results, we will see 4 columns here. First being overpower loss on the DC side. This represents for the total energy in the DC arrays that would be lost before reaching the inverter if no batteries are present in the system. So if we're using a very high DC ratio, this overpower loss is going to be incredible compared with any other scenarios. And then the second thing I want to explain is the overpower loss with the inverter with storage. And that's the third column we're looking at in that tab. And this specifies the amount of the clipped energy that will be recovered by our DC coupled batteries. And then finally, the fourth column would be the overpower loss inverters without storage. And this represents for the energy that will be lost anyway due to the clipping because the inverters are not located in the main power stations and therefore do not have the DC batteries connected to them. All right, so now if we do the same procedure, we aggregate the 15 minutes results and compare it with the hourly one, we also have observed a difference and we can see maybe sometimes we're overestimating the DC overpower loss, which is the power that we could use at every minute to charge our battery. And sometimes we're underestimating them as well. So we can see the clear difference there, and that will actually in return affect how we're strategizing our battery in real life. So going back to the charts and the table I was presenting you earlier, now we understand more. When the PV production is changing throughout the hour and eventually aggregating to hourly results, this will further dictate how we're strategizing our battery's behavior, how we're charging, how we're discharging, how much we're discharging, and these are all connected with how much money we're making eventually and overall the IRR for our battery solution. Finally, we're reaching the end of today's session, and I want to make a quick summary of our findings today with different resolution of data. Here to actually make the summary and conclusion more reasonable, our team has actually done 800 simulations in different continents and 5 different countries, including Costa Rica, Chile, Finland, Spain, and United States. And we have used hourly and 15 minutes data, and the disease ratio across from 1 to 1.4, and the outcomes are consistent with what we're seeing today on my case study as well. So first being, we actually observed a higher difference at the irradiance on the transposition of the POA. And this, our team has looked a bit into it, and we think it's due to both beam component and the diffuse component. And with the high resolution of the data, we are accounting for a better sun position throughout the hour, and we are taking off that mask of evening out of the entire hour for the sun position. And also we're accounting for a high resolution of the clouds, which Dr. Hugh has shown earlier with Solcast. We're having a much higher resolution, and that helps us having a better forecast of the meteor source. And overall, more accurate data will help us making the better design decisions and improve our overall results of the energy production prediction. And second of all, our sub-hourly energy forecast will help us to support a more granular grid management and help us to meet stricter and stricter grid standards and regulations across the world. And third of all, the sub-hourly data, as we were expanding a lot today, will explicitly capture our inverter power limits loss on a more higher granularity. And this output will give us a more realistic outcome instead of giving an assumption to our energy model, which poses maybe higher loss compared with our sub-hourly results. And this overall allow our management of the solar power variability on a higher resolution basis. And finally, calling back on our battery solution, what is the final impact on our battery behavior? We all know that our battery behavior depends heavily on our PV generation patterns. So with a more accurate energy forecast from our PV side, we could avoid overestimating sometimes of the charging opportunities when there's actually no such energy for us to charge, and to avoid underestimating our clipping periods, because we certainly have seen that throughout the hour there are a lot of energy spikes, and which led to higher clipping losses, and these are the energy we could have charged to our batteries, and we could avoid wasting all those energies by using higher resolution of data. And finally, we could avoid misrepresenting our curves, as I have shown you earlier, the charging and discharging curves. There is a subtle difference when we're using different levels of the meteor data, and all these will further impact on our robustness and the bankability of the battery solution overall in the end. And then finally, I also want to shout out to the incident happened yesterday in Europe. So basically, we have experienced a huge outage for maybe 12 hours, I think, in Spain, Portugal, and some parts of France. And that also poses an urgency for us to include more battery in our grid, in our power grid. And I think for Spain in 2025, there will be tens of gigawatts of the auction starting for the battery. Why is the battery so important? Because in these times of power outage, battery could also play a very important role to supply our grid or to help our with our black starts, which was hindering our power regeneration yesterday for 12 hours. So with a very bright future of the battery in Australia, in Europe, or across the world, we're also seeing, always seeing the battery booming in all of the continents and countries. We hope with the higher resolution of data with rated power, we could help you making a better decision and more accurate forecast and strategy of the battery. Okay, so that is all about the summary as well, and that comes to the end of today's session. We are going a little bit late on the time. We're gonna do some questions, and now let me have a look on the question box to see if we had any. Oh, okay. So I actually saw one um, from Mr. Khan, and he said how 1 hour scenarios and 15-minute scenarios is impacting the battery charge or its properties different way. Please elaborate if any logical explanation is there. All right, so if we go back to the chart, for example, we could, the discharging pattern of your battery is in rated power is based on two things. First, how much energy you're producing or how much energy we could use due to a high DC ratio here, for example, which is the table that I have shown earlier here and the differences here. And second is the energy price forecast. In this hour, this this energy price, does it make sense for us to charge the battery or discharge to the grid? So these are the two most important things dictating our algorithm behaving and generating that discharging curve. So with a higher resolution of the data, we see a clear difference on the production side, right? We observe a higher power loss, inverter power limits loss. We observe a slight difference on the transposition to the POA even. If the production is different, then with the same forecast of the energy price, we might have a different outcome of if we're charging, if we're discharging, how much we're charging and discharging per hour for our battery. So overall, this will influence on our pattern. Here is an aggregated table of 24 hours and 12 months. But if we go more into the details for 8,760 hours, we probably will see more difference per hour. And that has all the thing to do with how much revenue we're making eventually, how much energy we could actually discharge to the grid across the lifespan of our battery, and eventually our a battery battery solutions bankability when we're developing them. All right, so hope that was helpful. All right, okay. I see another question. What is the advantage of using sub-hourly meteor data if it results in a lower calculated yield? I love this question because at the beginning we were observing some lower energy yields and it was actually scary, right? If I go back to the slide. So I mentioned that our team has actually conducted more than 800 simulations for 5 different countries, and we observed consistent results. And here I want to highlight that the highest differences have been observed in the power limits cross for loss for the inverters, right? And we have seen a difference from 0% to 20% differently. So considering that they average that's, for example, maybe EDMV or any other company trying to compensate for the sub-hourly underestimation of the inverter power limits loss, they're throwing, for example, 2%, 3% extra loss to their final PR. If we can capture this loss more realistically, we could maybe have a better outcome and more certainty to our results, right? So overall, it's going to be a gain to our final results and forecasting. And also the good news is here I wrote that for the first year energy yield production, we observed a 200 megawatt hour difference between two scenarios in my case study. But if we compare it in a percentage, the good news is this 260 megawatt hour for the entire year, how much energy we're actually generating for this year is all is almost negligible. So we have observed that across 800 simulations, the differences are as low as 0.24% of the energy production over a whole year. So this number maybe looks scary in the megawatt hour, but in the percentage level, it's not that scary. Also, if it represents for a more realistic and accurate results, it will give you also more confidence for the bankability of your development. All right,
If
go
if I
ahead.
can add to that, I would say like the high resolution data gives you fewer surprises. You're closer to reality and closer to knowing the real losses or the losses that might be modeled by an independent engineer. So come time to do financing, you're less likely to get surprised than someone says, "Oh, you should be getting less power than that."
Yeah, that's super important. I remember yesterday you told me there's a principle of avoiding surprises is a key. Yeah. All right, I think that's what we're trying to do with a better forecast by the great work done by Solcast and also by more and more accurate energy model Rated Power is providing. We hope that we can give you less surprises when you're doing your project's development. All right, so we're actually already running out of time. It's a bit over time already. Thank you all for joining us, and thank you, most of all, Dr. Hugh, for joining us for this session. We've learned a lot from your parts and the company of Solcast as well. Thank you so much, the audience, and have a good day.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Thanks for everyone listening.
Thank you. Bye.